The buzz in the press room was electric, a lively aftermath to one of the most thrilling games of the season, until one question stopped everything. A reporter's sharp words cut through the noise, leaving Travis Kelce face to face with an insult on live TV. The tension was unbearable, every eye glued to him. What happened next didn't just shock the room, it left millions speechless. In the press room, reporters packed the space, their voices overlapping in a hum of urgency, cameras clicking incessantly. Travis Kelce sat at the center of it all, the bright overhead lights illuminating his face. He was composed, his body language casual, but there was a spark of energy about him, the kind that only came from sealing a victory with a game-winning play. Questions flew at him from every corner of the room. "What was going through your mind on that last drive?" one reporter asked, leaning forward eagerly. Kelce grinned, his easy charm filling the space. "Just trying to make the fans proud, man. Gotta love Kansas City." The room chuckled, the sound rippling like waves. But the rhythm of the conference abruptly shifted when a young reporter in the back stood up. Unlike the seasoned professionals surrounding her, she seemed out of place. Not inexperience, but something sharper in her demeanor. Her eyes locked onto Kelce as she raised her microphone. "Travis," she said, her voice clear and firm, "do you think all this attention is deserved? Or are you just riding the coattails of a great team?" The hum of the room fell into a tense silence. Pens stopped scratching. Fingers hovered over keyboards. Even the soft whirring of cameras seemed to pause. All eyes turned to Kelce. He blinked once, his smile fading into something quieter. The air felt heavier, charged with an unspoken challenge. Kelce leaned forward slightly, resting his forearms on the table. His response was calm, measured. "Well," he began, his voice steady, "it's never been about me. This game is about the team, every single guy out there working their tail off. I'm just lucky to be a part of it." The reporter didn't back down. "But do you think the spotlight ever takes away from others who might deserve it more?" she pressed, her tone almost daring him to stumble. Kelce tilted his head, a small flicker of a smile returning. "The spotlight's big enough for all of us," he replied smoothly. "I hope it inspires others, not takes away from them." The tension lingered as the reporter lowered her microphone. The room, still reeling from the shift in mood, seemed to hold its collective breath, waiting to see what would happen next. Cameras zoomed in on Kelce's face, capturing the unshakable calm in his expression. Somewhere in the background, the faint scratching of a pen resumed. The moment hadn't broken him. If anything, it had set the stage for something even bigger. The room felt frozen in time, the air thick with tension. Every eye in the press room was locked on Travis Kelce, who sat in the center of the chaos. The hum of whispered conversations and the faint clicking of cameras had evaporated the moment the question left the reporter's mouth. "Do you think all this attention is deserved? Or are you just riding the coattails of a great team?" The question had landed like a grenade. The reporters exchanged glances, some visibly stunned, others waiting to see how Kelce would react. Even the cameramen, usually focused only on their frames, hesitated, their lenses capturing the stillness in the room. Kelce didn't flinch. He didn't fire back, as many might have expected. Instead, he leaned back slightly in his chair, his face calm but focused, as if weighing the words carefully before responding. The pause was deafening, the tension heavy enough to make even the most seasoned reporters uncomfortable. His eyes met the reporter's, holding her gaze without a hint of anger. The cameras zoomed in, capturing every nuance of his expression, the quiet resolve, the faint crease of thought in his brow. And then, with a slow inhale, he began to speak. "Well," he said, his voice low and deliberate, "the way I see it, nothing worth having comes without work. Every guy in that locker room gives everything they've got, and I'm no exception. Do I deserve attention? Maybe, maybe not. But I know I've earned the chance to be here." His words were steady, unshakable, but there was no arrogance, only a calm humility. He gestured slightly toward the reporters. "This game isn't about me. It's about all of us, players, coaches, fans, even you guys telling the story. And if the attention I get inspires someone else to believe in themselves, then I'm okay with that." The room was silent, the kind of silence that spoke volumes. A few reporters nodded subtly, their pens poised but unmoving. One, seated near the front, leaned back in his chair, a faint smile on his face. Others whispered to one another, their voices too low to hear. The reporter, still standing with her microphone, faltered slightly. Her confidence, so bold just moments ago, began to crack. A faint flush crept into her cheeks as she realized the room wasn't on her side. She shifted on her feet, as if searching for a follow-up question. But Kelce wasn't finished. "The truth is," he continued, his tone softening, "I'm grateful for every opportunity I've had. None of this, none of it, happens without my teammates, my family, and everyone who's helped me along the way. So, if I'm lucky enough to have this platform, I'm going to use it to lift others up, not tear them down." A murmur ran through the room, this one filled with quiet admiration. The tension had transformed into something else: respect. The reporter slowly lowered her microphone, her expression a mixture of embarrassment and reluctant awe. Kelce's eyes swept across the room one last time before settling back on her. "Thanks for the question," he said simply, his tone genuine, not sarcastic. The room exhaled, the energy shifting back into motion. A pen scratched hurriedly on paper. A cameraman whispered to his colleague. But the moment lingered, hanging in the air like an unspoken lesson. Kelce shifted in his chair slightly, his calm demeanor unchanged. There was more to come, though no one in the room could yet predict how far this moment would ripple. The question hung in the air, but for the reporter who asked it, time seemed to slow. She could feel the weight of every pair of eyes in the room shifting between her and Travis Kelce, her boldness ricocheting back at her like an unrelenting echo. The confidence she wore so carefully now felt brittle, but she tightened her grip on the microphone. She had no choice but to hold her ground. Just hours earlier, she had stood in front of the mirror in her cramped studio apartment, rehearsing questions for this very moment. The words she chose weren't an accident. They were calculated, crafted to stand out in a sea of routine interviews. Her editor's voice still rang in her head. "Make it sharp. Make it memorable. No one remembers safe questions." It wasn't just about the story. It was about survival. Journalism was cutthroat, and she was drowning under the pressure. In an industry dominated by big names and bigger egos, her voice often felt like a whisper in a crowded room. She had clawed her way to this press conference, a coveted assignment meant to prove she belonged. Still, the question she had thrown at Kelce wasn't just about career ambition. It was rooted in something deeper, more personal. Growing up, she had seen her father, a blue-collar worker who gave everything to his family, overlooked and underappreciated. Men like him didn't get the spotlight. they didn't have people applauding their hard work or calling them heroes. When she looked at athletes like Travis Kelce, she saw privilege. She saw someone who, to her, seemed to have the world handed to him, while others, like her father, toiled in the shadows. But now, standing in this room, with Kelce's calm eyes fixed on her, the cracks in her perspective started to show. The silence in the room pressed against her like a weight. She shifted her stance slightly, her pulse quickening. Kelce's earlier words about teamwork, gratitude, and lifting others up replayed in her mind. She had expected him to falter, to show some arrogance or entitlement, but he hadn't. Instead, he had turned her question into a testament to his character, leaving her unsure of how to respond. As she lowered the microphone, her editor's instructions seemed distant, almost hollow. She glanced down at her notebook, the words scribbled there now feeling more like a strategy than a story. From the corner of her eye, she caught Kelce glancing at her again. His expression wasn't smug or condescending. It was understanding, almost forgiving. The moment lingered as she realized something profound was happening, not just for her career, but for her own perspective. She didn't know what she would write about this yet, but she knew one thing. This story wasn't going to be what she thought it would be. The next question was asked, pulling the room back into motion. But she remained still, the weight of her choice and its consequences settling heavily on her shoulders. The moment didn't just stay in the press room, it exploded. Within hours, the clip of Travis Kelce's response to the sharp question was everywhere. Social media lit up like wildfire, with the video shared on every platform imaginable. Fans flooded Twitter, praising Kelce's calm and thoughtful answer. Hashtags like #ClassAct and #Kelce Inspires shot to the top of the trending list, accompanied by posts dissecting every second of his response. "Now, that's how you handle tough questions," one user wrote, their post racking up thousands of likes. Another chimed in. "Kelce just turned an insult into pure inspiration." "What a guy!" Teammates jumped in, adding their voices to the chorus. "Not surprised," one player tweeted. "That's just who Kelce is, a leader on and off the field." Even retired legends of the game shared their admiration, calling it a masterclass in handling pressure. The reporter, however, found herself caught in the eye of the storm. Clips of her question circulated alongside Kelce's response, and the reaction wasn't kind. Comments flooded her social media accounts, many criticizing her for being disrespectful. Did she really think that question was a good idea? One comment read, "harsh and unforgiving." Another simply said, "This is why no one trusts the media." At first she tried to brush it off, but as the backlash grew louder, her resolve started to crack. Sitting alone in her small apartment, she stared at her phone, the harsh glow of the screen illuminating her face. The comments weren't just mean, they were relentless. For every post defending her right to ask tough questions, there were 10 more tearing her apart. Her editor had warned her this might happen. "Be bold," they'd said. "Stand out, but be prepared for the heat." Still, she hadn't expected this level of vitriol. She scrolled through the video for the 100th time, but now it felt different. She wasn't hearing her own words anymore. She was hearing his. Kelce's calm, measured tone stuck with her. The way he shifted the focus from himself to his team, to the fans, to the bigger picture. It wasn't a defense. It was a statement. and it was a reminder of everything she had lost sight of in her pursuit of recognition. Elsewhere, the video had sparked deeper conversations. Fans discussed the pressure athletes face under the spotlight, while others debated the role of journalists in holding public figures accountable. The clip was no longer just about Kelce or the reporter. It had become a broader discussion about grace, respect, and responsibility. For the reporter, the noise was overwhelming, but beneath it was something else: clarity. She couldn't quite put it into words yet, but Kelce's response had planted a seed. Maybe the next time she held a microphone, her question would come from a different place. Meanwhile, Kelce hadn't said a word publicly since the press conference, but there was a sense that this moment wasn't over. Something bigger was on the horizon, and everyone was waiting to see what would happen next. Weeks after the press conference, the reporter sat at her desk, staring blankly at her email inbox. It had been a rough few weeks. The backlash from her questions still lingered, leaving her confidence battered. She had written several pieces since then, each carefully polished, but none of them carried the spark she used to feel. Somewhere along the way, she'd lost her sense of purpose. Then, her eyes caught an email in bold. The sender: Travis Kelce. Her stomach tightened as she opened it, unsure of what to expect. The message was short but direct. Kelce was hosting an event for aspiring journalists, and he wanted her to attend as a guest. There was no trace of anger or condescension in his words, just an invitation. The event was held in a modest conference hall, far from the bright lights of the stadium. When she arrived, the room was buzzing with young journalists, some clutching notebooks, others fiddling nervously with cameras. Kelce stood at the front, his presence as commanding as ever. But there was no podium, no flashy display, just him, speaking to the group as if he were one of them. She stayed near the back, hesitant to approach. She wasn't sure if he'd even notice her, but when his eyes scanned the room, they landed on hers. He smiled, a small, knowing gesture, and motioned for her to come forward. When she reached him, her words tumbled out before she could stop them. "I owe you an apology," she said, her voice trembling. "I shouldn't have asked that question the way I did. I wasn't fair to you." Kelce listened intently, his expression soft but unreadable. When she finished, he nodded. "You know," he said, "questions like that, they can challenge people in the right way or the wrong way. But it's not about being perfect. It's about where you go from here." He didn't lecture her or make her feel small. Instead, he encouraged her to use her platform to uplift, to ask questions that mattered without tearing others down. As Kelce spoke to the audience, sharing stories about resilience, teamwork, and the importance of accountability, she couldn't help but watch him with a newfound respect. This wasn't just a player defending his reputation. This was a man using his influence to teach something deeper. By the end of the event, she felt something she hadn't in a long time, a sense of clarity. Watching Kelce speak, seeing how his kindness had transformed her own outlook, she realized this moment was bigger than a story. It was a ripple, one that could extend far beyond the walls of this room. As the event wrapped up, she stayed for a moment, watching the young journalists eagerly approach Kelce with questions. In that instant, she made a quiet vow to herself. The next story she told would come from a place of integrity,